writing is interesting because I think people often are like, think about writing in ways that they don't think about other pursuits, in the sense that like a young person will sit down and try to write, and if they can't, they're like, I'm not a writer. You know, like, it's too hard. I don't.
Right.
But we don't do that with like
Right.
other we don't do that when you sit down and play piano. Nobody expects you to play like Coltrane the first time, or like Bach. When you sit down and play basketball for the first time, nobody expects you to shoot like Steph Curry or dunk like MJ. Like, it is understood in our sort of cultural milieu that like you have to put the work in.
Right.
And so that's why I always tell people, like, I wrote like 60, 70,000 words of this book.
Right.
That got tossed out.
Right.
Before I got to the first word of what would be the book.
Right.
Like a year and a half, 2 years of like what I thought the book was. And then being like, oh, actually those 4 or 5 chapters that I wrote, those now are in the bin.
Right.
On my computer somewhere. But like, and I think a version of me years ago would have thought of that as like, oh, look at all this wasted time. But now I'm more accurately understand it as like, that's the practice. Right. Like that's the part of that is you going to the gym. And like shooting 100 3-pointers. That is you going into the, the music room and like practicing for 3 hours. That is it is the cost of what you do. It is the book does not show up fully developed. It does not show up as a fully matured thing. It goes through so many different iterations. So, and even before you get to the stuff that you are revising, everything you write, everything you read before you come to the page, or before you get to what is ultimately the first page of the book, is not like, as I said, it's not a waste of time. It wasn't preventing you from getting to the book. That is the excavation that you need to do to get to the project in the first place. And that's why being a writer is like, it's hard. It's a blessing. It's amazing. It's like, I endlessly feel so lucky that I have a life of words, ideas, and reading. And it can also drive you crazy. But I think all artists in their own way feel that way about their craft. It's the thing you love. It's also the things that like drives you up the wall a little bit.
Right. It's funny that like that we're not funny, but it's interesting to me that we're talking about this now because, as you're saying it, it's very clear to me, right? That, and it's something that I always talk about, when I'm, when people ask me, about, like what I'm working on next, and then so sometimes normally I say, well, like I'm always trying to evolve as a writer. I'm always trying to grow as a writer and to challenge myself, right? And so it's like very clear to me when we're sitting here and you're talking about it, right? That, that it's all practice. It's all work. It's all part of this, of you like constantly evolving and learning and growing, right? And changing in your work. But I guess it's just funny to me, because at the beginning of every project, it's like I forget all of that because I feel like I'm at this point where, where nothing is there, right? Where I have nothing, or at least there's nothing on the page, right? I may have done, may have read book after book after book after book, right? And have all these ideas sort of bouncing around in my head and a vague understanding of like the world that I'm writing about. But there's always that point at the beginning where, I don't know, it's almost like I feel like I forget that I've done it before, right? Or I forget that it is possible, and that writing is about like that constant, sort of, struggling and evolving and pushing yourself and making yourself uncomfortable, right? I think that that I forget that. And I guess I'm sort of thinking about that now because I'm at the very beginning of the next book that I'm working on, right? Where I'm in like, I'm in the trenches. I'm in like the first chapter, right? And I'm at this point where I have like 3 different beginnings on my computer, right? And I keep abandoning one beginning and then I'll move to another beginning. I abandon one beginning, move to another beginning, because I just feel like I have no idea what's going on, right? And it's just like, as you were saying, like I'm finding my way towards like the true beginning of the story. But I guess, I don't know, I guess the entire process takes so long that you sort of forget what it takes to get to that point where you find your way.
Do you think that's like a unconscious mode of like self-preservation where your body is
probably
like shedding
probably
everything that like, okay, like let's forget those past 7 years,
right,
so that
right,
because maybe if you fully remembered you'd be like,
right, I don't want to do this again, right,
I'm not gonna do this,
right.
No, that's so interesting. I mean, I definitely am in like experience seasons to my like relationship to, I feel like in my career there have been seasons, because there are seasons of life. And before we started, the camera started recording, like we were talking about our kids. Like when I wrote How the Word Is Passed, my kid, I mean, when I started that book, my son was like 5 months old.
Wow.
And my daughter hadn't even been born yet. When it was published, they were 4 and 2. Now they are almost 7 and 5.
Right.
And so I'm in a very different season of their lives, which means I'm in a different season of my life.
Right.
Which means, and we were talking before about like, now we're in like extracurricular,
right,
basketball,
right,
soccer practice,
right,
and ballet,
right,
stuff. And what, on a functional level, what that means is that like I have less time,
right,
to write,
right,
during the day, which is very different than my life before,
right,
which is like, I was writing I did my best writing between like 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. With like some chicken wings here and like a Heineken here. And I'm not built like that anymore.
Right.
Once the sun goes down, I'm like correct. But it's interesting because after like drop off and before pickup, and I made emails, administrative stuff, the window of time in which I have to write was like increasingly smaller.
Right.
And I think sometimes that feels overwhelming for me because I look back and I'm like, man, I used to have like hours, or I used to be able to like go on like big long retreats,
right,
and I can't do that the same way. And so I've had to like reconceptualize my relationship to work, and also I think I've had to become more gracious to myself about like how much time I should be spending doing this. And I've also had to, and do a lot of things, but like ensure that I am not falling captive to like narrow capitalistic conceptions of productivity.
Right.
Because God willing, the thing about being a writer is not like working in a factory. Like we're blessed enough we can write the rest of our lives.
Right.
My kids will only be kids for however many, the kids who will actually want to talk to you.
Right.
Like, like teenagers who are like, get on my face, man.
Right.
Like that window of time is so brief. Right. I think I just this past year, I've like more fully come to realize that. And I think it is made, like I wrote How the Word Is Passed in like a sort of existential, frenetic frenzy. Like it was like I can't finish this.
Right.
This is like the work that is going to define.
Right.
It's just I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I've done my best to like try not to work with that sort of pressure, and like to just let it, like some days it's going to come, some days it's not, some days you're going to use those 3 hours you got really well, some days you're going to sit there and bang your head against the computer, but to remember to come back to what we were saying before, that like that's all a part of it, like that is and even to move away from like good day and bad day.
Right.
Just like this day look like this.
Right.
This writing day look like that.
Right.
And I think it's helped me, just like on a personal level,
Right.
be more, a lot calmer,
Right.
and a lot more present for my family,
Right.
and not just present for the work.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, like when you said that about you know, like you having to sort of separate your work, or try to, I guess, I don't know, like shift your work away from you know, like capitalist ideas about like productivity, you know, and how efficient you are, right? And you know, and I don't know, how quickly you get things done, right? And then because I feel like a subtext in what you were saying is like, you said like, you know, this is going to be this book that defines me as a writer, right? And that is going to do so much, right, for your career. And I feel like that's another thing that right now that I have been thinking about a lot and sort of struggling with, because I've been trying to remind myself, right, that this is not a competition. And I think we're made to feel like it's a competition, right? Because of the way that the publishing industry, you know, is, because of the way that the publishing industry is, you know, is set up, because of the way that it works, right? You know, because of the way that publicity works, because of, you know what I'm saying? Like I think that the entire structure is set up in such a way that it makes you feel like it's a competition, when in fact it is not a competition, right? Like it's about the art. It's about the love, you know, that you have for the work that you do, and whether or not that work is, you know, you're like speaking with your full authentic self and your full authentic voice. Yeah, so that's something that I've actually been thinking about a lot recently, and having to like, you know, and I know it sounds weird, because you wouldn't think that, I guess, somebody in my position would be like wrestling with that.
If it's competition, you're at the top
Right,
of the, but it doesn't feel like
it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it, and it doesn't feel like it, and it has been, I think, in the same way, you know, that it did when I was writing my first book. Like it's been, as I'm working on this new book, it's been making me feel like I've been sort of doubting myself, right? I've been doubting myself. I've been doubting my abilities. I've been doubting, you know, the work that I've done. You know, just. Yeah, I've been doubting everything. And so one of my friends who's a writer, just, you know, he was asking me how I was doing, and I was telling him how I was doing. And then he was like, yo, it's not a competition. I know they make us feel like it's a competition, but it's not a competition, you know, like, you know, the work is the work. And so I don't know. So your comment reminded me of that. And so I thought I'd share, because I don't know. I mean, I think that it's easy for us to sort of feel that way, because, you know, because I don't know, in some ways I feel like sometimes we feel like it's like Highlander, right? Like there can only be one, but it's not, right? I mean, the work is the work, the stories are the stories, you know. I mean, they're the things that, you know, that will bear real fruit in the world, right? And usher beauty into the world, and will hopefully still be here, you know, and still be, you know, people will still read them, and they'll still be hopefully affecting real change in the world even after we're not here. So I don't know. I have to remind myself of that, I think. And I think it's, I don't know, useful to share that, because I think if more of us, you know, were aware of the fact that it's not a competition, I think, I don't know, like I wonder what we would be capable of in our art. Like I wonder how our art would grow and how it will evolve and how it would change and what kind of freedom that we might feel, and the kinds of stories that we, tell, and the way we tell our stories if we, I don't know, if we sort of shrug off this idea about competition.